What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Andrew Narayanan, and you're watching AP for Teens. You're watching AP US Government and Politics, and as you can see, today we're going to be discussing federalism, the central idea of the Constitution. Let me sit down. Alright, let's begin with a small review. In the last video, what exactly were we talking about? Well, we discussed what the Constitutional Convention was. We discussed the major decisions of the convention with all of these people here, and we discussed the divide that occurred afterwards. Click on the link right there for that video. Why is there a red? Never mind. Today, on the other hand, we're going to be discussing what federalism is. We're also going to discuss the powers of the governments, and I'll explain the S in governments in a little bit. And we're going to discuss a few of the clauses in the Constitution that help federalism out. So, who's ready? Let's go. Alright, so as we always open the curtains up, what is federalism? What really is federalism? Well, federalism is a system of government where the national or federal government shares power with the local or state government. Now, throughout these videos, not just this section, but probably for the rest of the AP government series, I'm probably going to switch around between national and federal, local and state. I'll probably switch the names around, so if you want to understand these videos, I advise making sure you realize that national and federal are the same thing, local and state are the same thing. You could also make local as literal like city or county governments, but majority of the time you compare the national and state government. Federalism is contrasted by a confederation, which is a system where the power is primarily given to the states, while the federal government is only given power for international conduct. So the government with the Articles of Confederation, that was a confederation government because the power was given primarily to the states, while the federal government dealt with outside influences. Some states, and by states I mean countries that use federalism, include Germany, Switzerland, Australia, and basically the majority of countries out there in the world. Now, the powers of the governments. The different powers of the government are split between one of three options. A power could be strictly national, which means that only the federal government is the one that has this power. Power could be strictly state, which is the same thing. A government can only be state. And then there's also shared between the two. Powers that both governments have all of, or both governments have a portion of. The Constitution specifically states what powers go to who. So let's start looking at some of those powers. National powers. The powers that belong to the national government are called one of a few names. You could see any of these names, in my opinion, on not only your class exam, but on the AP exam. You could see delegated powers, you could see express powers, you could see enumerated powers. Some examples of these type of powers are printing money, as you can see here, printing that money. Regulating intertrade, interstate trade, international trade, same thing. Foreign policy, obviously you don't want the state of Oklahoma, who doesn't really have sea borders, let alone the ability to probably go out and talk to other countries. You don't want them conducting all our foreign policy. You want the entire country as a whole having those opinions. And war, that's not the picture of war. But Duran, that's not the picture of war. You can take that out. Take that out. Give me a better picture of war. Alright, Lego war works. War. National government is the only government between all of the different types, different levels, that has the ability to go to war. Because obviously, you're not going to see the state of Texas go to war against, Spain. Well, actually. You're not going to see the state of Texas go to war against, like, Russia or China or any place like that. State powers. The powers that belong to the state government are reserved powers. According to the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, and I quote, literally, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. That's literally pretty much the entire 10th Amendment right there. Examples of these type of powers include issuing licenses, regulation of intra-business, not inter, intra. Intra would mean inside its own territory. So the state of Texas can make trades between Texas and Texas. California can make trades between San Diego and Sacramento, type of thing. And federal elections, the states have to run and pay for those federal elections, despite them not being really influential to their own government. They still have to run them. And then the combo meals, your combinations. Powers shared by both the national and state governments are called concurrent powers. Some examples of concurrent powers including collecting taxes, because you have state taxes and federal taxes. Building roads, because there are national roads, state roads, local roads, courts as well, and borrowing money. Alright, but let's throw away that napkin. Clauses of the Constitution. Full faith and credit clause. The federal government must protect the states and prevent the states to do their own thing without congressional consent. In return, the states must accept the actions of all other states. This is basically the idea that the federal government must protect the states and must make sure that the states follow congressional consent, congressional rule, and at the same time the states must accept the decisions of all the other states. So for example, if you are allowed to have a license in one state, you can have a license in another. You technically are allowed that license despite moving to a different state where you may not have had that license. Privileges and immunities. The state cannot refuse a public service to a citizen because of where that person lives. I live in Delaware. If I try to move to New Jersey and want to call the police up, they can't refuse me because I live in Delaware. The extradition, which is the idea that fugitives from one state must be returned to that state for their own trials and stuff. Now, this was originally meant to include slaves, and it still technically includes slaves, but now it's not necessarily that. It's more along the lines of, criminals that move and try to run away from their home state. And the supremacy clause, a very important clause. Conflicts between state and federal laws are resolved in favor of federal law. That's extremely important. So state laws that violate the Constitution or treaties, federal laws, they can be invalidated through this supremacy clause. That's extremely important because that's actually a written right in the Constitution that federal laws are better than state laws. Now, despite the fact that we're not done federalism, this is a good stopping point. Next time we're going to discuss the different types of federalism, because there are multiple different types, the working definition of federalism, grants and how they impact federalism, and the advantages and disadvantages of, guess what, federalism. Thank you very much for watching this episode of AP US Government and Politics. Please do one of the following: subscribe, leave a comment, or like, follow those arrows, and do what they say. And I hope to see you next time on another episode of AP US Government and Politics. You've been watching AP for Teens.